Mic sound check 1 2. Test test 1 2. Mic sound check 1 2. Test test 1 2. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're about ready to begin. Can you guys please silence your phones?
Joseph DeAngelo accused of horrific crimes that span the state. So the big question has been how and where he'll be tried, and we expect the answers to that here very shortly. This is some video of the 72-year-old suspected serial killer. DeAngelo is already facing 13 murder counts. That number could grow. Other offices have also been investigating murders in other areas as well as kidnappings. The former police officer was arrested more than 4 decades after the strange killings took place. Great DNA relative provided for a genealogy website lit up as a partial hit. Detectives later matched DeAngelo's DNA to evidence from the searches. Now, 4 of the brutal killings happened in Orange County with pictures of those victims. In August of 1982, Harrington was murdered in James County. In February of 1981, the Manuela victim was killed in her urban home. And in May of 1986, Sister Gina Cruz was murdered in Irvine. She was covered in blood, exposed to and knocked out. That was in the killing of Johnson with sexual assault and unusual positions on the ground. DeAngelo was found living in his house. Prosecution was also responsible for another back in the sheriff has been a lot of talk about how all this will be handled. So many different kinds of involved again. Imagine that more shortly.
Well, thank you for joining us here today for an update on the case of Joseph James DeAngelo. We're joined by Contra Costa County District Attorney Dinah Beckton, Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert, Santa Barbara County District Attorney Joyce Dudley, and Ventura County District Attorney Gregory D. Totten. I'll straighten that out. Where is? Oh, I'm sorry, and Tulare County District Attorney Tim Ward. So, all of these agencies have been part of a multi-agency task force to solve this case, and I think we also have Supervisor Lisa Bartlett with us. Is she here? Okay. So this human predator, DeAngelo, took a path through all of these counties in our state. And wherever he went, he left a wake of terror in his path. He committed vicious, violent crimes throughout all of these jurisdictions. We've been meeting and working together to work on the management of this case, to determine the best place to conduct the case and how best to handle it. We've been, and as you know, our team, of course, has been working for decades to try to capture this person and this individual who's created such terror throughout the state, and even to the point of opening a window or walking a dog in your neighborhood a terrorizing experience. Each of these DAs have taken into account, when we're working together as a group, taken various things into account to determine how and where to handle this trial. The location and complexity, the likelihood of evidence associated with the charges, where the offenses occurred, the rights of the defendant and the people, the convenience of or the hardship to the various victims and witnesses, those people who were likely to appear on the case. All of these things have factored in. So as a group, we've determined that the trial should take place in Sacramento. There was a complaint filed this morning in Sacramento, and it alleges the combination of the cases from all of our jurisdictions that are going to be filed and prosecuted, and it's 13 counts of murder with special circumstances of murder during the course of burglary, murder during the course of a rape, multiple murder, and 13 counts of kidnapping for robbery. So each of these district attorneys will speak to you, and also Lisa Bartlett will have a few words as well. So we're going to start with Greg Totten. Greg.
Thank you, District Attorney Rakakis. Good morning again. I'm Greg Totten, Ventura County District Attorney. The complaint filed today in Sacramento Superior Court against Joseph James DeAngelo reflects the sheer criminal breadth, the geographic scope, and the generational impact of this very significant case. It is a case that began more than 4 decades ago and profoundly altered the lives of countless individuals across multiple jurisdictions from Southern to Northern California. The complaint alleges 13 murders with 18 rape and burglary special circumstance allegations and 6 use of a firearm allegations in connection with those murders. The complaint also alleges an additional 13 kidnapped for purposes of robbery allegations and 21 special allegations of the use of a weapon in connection with those offenses. These crimes span an 11-year period from 1975 to 1986 and took place in the 6 jurisdictions that stand before you today. The complaint also reveals something very fundamental about the prosecution team that stands before you, namely that we are unified and we are committed to delivering justice to the victims of the Golden State Killer and their loved ones who for far too long have had justice elude them. The decision to charge crimes and allegations occurring in 6 separate jurisdictions in Sacramento Superior Court reflects our collective judgment that a single prosecution in a single jurisdiction serves the best interest of the case, its victims, and the cause of justice. It is also a process that is authorized by California statutory law as well as decisional law coming from the California Supreme Court. I must say it is also fitting that we are gathered today holding this news conference here in the Orange County District Attorney's Office. District Attorney Tony Rakakis has been a state and national leader in the field of forensic DNA. It was his office and under his leadership that first connected the murders in my jurisdiction in Ventura County with the murders that occurred in Orange County. It was also his office that later in 2001 connected the murders that occurred in Santa Barbara County with the Orange County and Ventura County murders as well. And I know that going forward, his prosecutors and his investigators are going to play a very pivotal role in the successful prosecution of this case. I also want to acknowledge that I have great confidence in the leadership of District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert and her ability to lead a statewide team that is going to include prosecutors and investigators from Ventura County and numerous other jurisdictions in the aggressive, unrelenting, and unyielding effort to bring a serial killer to justice. With today's unified filing, the prosecution of this case begins. Bottom line, we are united, we are together, and we are going forward with an unyielding determination to have a successful result in this case. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Joyce Dudley from Santa Barbara County.
Good morning. We know the criminal justice system doesn't feel just to those who waited decades for an arrest. We also know that we can never give those victims and those victims' loved ones those decades back. And we know that because we have always known justice delayed is justice denied. Therefore, we concluded that more than anything else, our still suffering victims and their loved ones needed this injustice to end. Step one was clearly the arrest, an arrest which was surgically orchestrated by Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert. Step two has to be taking this case to trial as soon as possible in Sacramento, where we can combine all of our cases where the defendant now resides. We now have the opportunity to have a single, comprehensive, speedy trial for all victims. And that was an opportunity that none of your district attorneys wanted to pass up. None of this would have been possible had it not been for the district attorneys who stand up here today with me. We all felt it was so critically important that justice be denied no longer. Special thanks to Tony Rakakis. Tony has had and continues to have great insight into our criminal justice system. He has done this for decades. He understands how victim feels. He understands how the loved ones of victims feel. And he wants very much to bring justice to all. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Tim Ward, Tulare County District Attorney. There's one count in the amended complaint filed this morning that reflects crimes occurring in Tulare County. I believe it's actually count one of the complaint. Correlates to a murder that occurred in the city of Visalia in the fall of 1975. I, along with Visalia Police Chief Jason Salazar, we agree and fully support the consolidation of this case and the prosecution going forward in Sacramento. We have full faith and confidence not only in District Attorney Schubert, but the men and women of that office, that they will spearhead what should be and will be a successful prosecution and justice for the victims across the state. I can tell you that the Tulare County murder remained under investigation for over 40 years. And I stand here today representing a family impacted by tragedy because of a successful and an amazing collaboration of law enforcement officers and district attorneys across this state. When I and the members of my office and law enforcement in Tulare County needed anything from Sacramento, Ventura, or Santa Barbara, those district attorneys' office and law enforcement were ready to answer the call. And certainly last but not least, to Tony Rackauckas and the men and women of the Orange County District Attorney's Office. Sir, I have been humbled and will continue to be forever in your gratitude and thanks for what you and your amazing team of professionals and experts have brought to the table. We are here today as Tulare County victims in no small part, sir, than for what you have done and provided to this. Going forward, our thoughts and our prayers are now with the families impacted by these crimes across the state as we transition into what will now be the prosecution of this case. It is my distinct honor at this point in time to introduce the elected District Attorney of Contra Costa County, the Honorable Dinah Becton.
Good morning. I can announce this morning that the Contra Costa County District Attorney's Office is able to charge 4 separate cases against Joseph DeAngelo for the crimes in our county. DeAngelo could face 4 life sentences plus 10 years for the alleged crimes of kidnapping during the course of robbery in Contra Costa County if he is convicted. For decades, he evaded justice and devastated communities across California. Due to the severity of these crimes, these victims often face tremendous trauma after so much time has passed. Thankfully, we can now hold someone accountable for these crimes and seek justice for our victims. Our victim advocates team remains involved with each victim, and we are offering services and helping coordinate with the state to ensure these victims get the assistance that they deserve. We thank District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert for her role in handling all of the charges statewide, which will allow for efficiency of all of our resources and hopefully swifter justice for all of our victims. My office will remain in close contact with DA Schubert's office as we work together to prosecute these cases. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert, Sacramento.
Good morning. I am honored, I'm humbled, and I'm incredibly proud to stand here with my colleagues today. As Mr. Totten said, we stand united. We stand united, as I often call our team, which is Team Justice. As everyone's mentioned today, this morning, around 10 o'clock, in Sacramento Superior Court, my office filed an amended felony complaint alleging all crimes for all counties in one felony complaint. 26 counts, 13 murders, 10 of which carry special circumstances, 13 charges of what we call kidnap for robbery, which at the time in the 70s was what we call a life term, thus allowing us the opportunity to file those charges. 9 of those 13 counts arise out of incidents, kidnap rapes in Sacramento County that occurred between 1976 and 1977. Mr. DeAngelo will be arraigned on this amended felony complaint this Thursday in Sacramento in Department 61 at 1:30. I don't think it can be underestimated and said enough that this case, while it's in Sacramento, is nothing other than a team of prosecutors from all over the state who have been deeply affected by the conduct of Mr. DeAngelo. I would remind everyone, for those of you that went to the press conference this April, that this team, what I call Team Justice, was formed long before an arrest was made, long before anyone had ever heard the name of Joseph DeAngelo. In fact, this team of folks standing here and counties standing here was formed in September of 2016, a few months after the 40th anniversary that occurred at the press conference in Sacramento hosted by our sheriff and our FBI. In September of 2016, these counties came together with their passion, with their persistence, and with their resources, all with one goal in mind: to bring justice for the most significant, probably the most notorious unsolved serial rape killing in California history. And that's what we did, not just because the case deserved it, but victims, the countless number of victims that were affected, whether direct victims or secondary victims. And I've said this many times, you can ask anybody in Sacramento that grew up in this community if they have a story, and everyone does. After that meeting in September of 2016, each county stepped up, and we continued on with what I have often called as our journey for justice. We dedicated prosecutors, we dedicated crime lab staff, we dedicated investigators. At that time, in September of 2016, I also want to thank Mr. Rackauckas, because for those folks that don't know in this room, Mr. Rackauckas has a nationally known DNA unit that is second to none. They have knowledge and expertise really at one thing: finding the truth through the use of forensic DNA evidence. There is no doubt that that unit and his prosecutors and his investigators and all those folks standing here together will continue their role in this prosecution. On April 25th of this year in Sacramento, we announced the arrest of Joseph DeAngelo. There was a few things that I said at that press conference that I think need to be repeated. One, we were looking for a needle in a haystack, and we found it. And two, the answer has and always was been in Sacramento. So when somebody asks me, as the District Attorney of Sacramento County, how do you feel about this case of this magnitude coming to Sacramento, California for prosecution? My answer is very simple. It is very fitting that this journey for justice that has been sought for over 40 years ends in Sacramento. I am proud to work with the colleagues standing with us, and I look forward to ending this journey for justice. Thank you. And at this time, I'd reintroduce Mr. Rackauckas.
Thank you. The Orange County murders, horrible, terrifying murders, occurred in Supervisor Lisa Bartlett's district, and so she has a few words. Supervisor.
Good morning. Lisa Bartlett, Orange County Supervisor, 5th District. On August the 21st, 1980, 2 people were brutally murdered in the middle of the night. Keith and Patrice Harrington were murdered in Orange County, in my district, and in my home city of Dana Point. The Golden State Killer has terrorized the community, state, over the last couple of decades. I'm deeply appreciative of District Attorney Tony Rackauckas and his office's critical role during this investigation. After decades of uncertainty, the family of victims will finally have hope and resolution for justice to be served. Thank you.
So before opening the floor to questions, as we were about to do, I'd like to just indicate that we need to have you, before you ask a question, take the mic and indicate your name and your news agency so that we know who we're talking to. And speak into the mic because we're also taping it for social media. So if somebody has any question.
Yeah, Chris Ancarlo, KFI News. 2 questions. 1, why was the announcement here? And 2, Ms. Dudley, I know that you were kind of the orchestrator of this group, the announcement you made on the steps in Santa Barbara County. What role have you played in the last, I'd say, month of bringing this together?
Well, why is the announcement here? This is a statewide case. Much of the criminal conduct happened in Sacramento, as you know, and So we've been doing things, and we did some meetings in Sacramento. We've done meetings in the central part of the state, Central Coast, and we're having this press conference here. Ms. Dudley?
It's exactly as Mr. Rockaka said. The first announcement was in Sacramento, and then the second meeting was on the Central Coast in the Santa Barbara County District Attorney's Office. Then we had another meeting in Los Angeles near Ventura County, and now we're here. So we really at all times wanted to make sure that we were being inclusive, and the role that I played is the same role that all my colleagues have played. We have an undying quench for justice, and we want to make sure that the victims and their loved ones have that feeling of knowing that we all have done everything we can to bring this case to trial.
Cara Finstrom with CBS 2 here. Do you anticipate that any additional charges or counts will be filed?
The question is whether or not we anticipate any additional charges or counts, and that's really tough to say. I think that we've filed everything that we have right now that we're able to file, but we're not done with the investigation. We still have a large team working on the case, and we're still looking at evidence of things that have happened in different parts of the state, and so I can't rule out the possibility that there could be other charges filed.
Hi, Craig Figner with KNX 1070 News Radio. A lot is made over DNA evidence and the care and storage of it. How much DNA evidence do you have in this case that could, there maybe now are better storage techniques than there were in, say, 1975 with the first Visalia killing? So my question is, will that be an issue, you think, at trial?
Everything about DNA will be an issue at the trial, of course. It's a major part of the evidence in our case. It's how our murder counts and other counts were put together. But we did I think that the storage was certainly fine in the sense that once we got the DNA from evidence, it was in good condition to be able to analyze. So I think we're going to be good with that, and I think we all feel confident that our DNA analysis is good, done by solid professional people, and I think we're okay. If anybody wants to add to that.
Sam Marie, so just to give it anecdotal, my background before being elected was I spent the majority of my career doing forensic DNA cold cases. And I can tell you, and I'm sure every one of my colleagues up here has had a similar situation. We've prosecuted cases based on DNA that go in my county as far back as 1972. So while we expect and understand that we will have a full and vigorous defense of this case, I have every bit of faith in the forensic DNA evidence that was conducted in this case, just like any other cold case where we seek and get convictions.
Vicki Vargas, NBCLA, following up on the DNA. We did a story with you, Tony, about the rapid DNA. Will that come into play in any of this, number one? Number two, there are some who kind of want to ride the coattails of this prosecution and claim there are cases that should change now because of what you're learning. So twofold, the DNA and then the case that's pending out there.
All right, thank you. First of all, with respect to the rapid DNA, that's a process where we can get DNA from a crime scene or an individual and analyze it in a relatively short time, within a couple of hours. And it hasn't had any part in anything that we've done in this case, and frankly, I don't expect it to. I don't really see where it might fit in. I don't think we have a need to try to use a rapid DNA analysis. On the second part of the question, I alluded to that a little bit. Basically, what you're saying is that there are other people suggesting that maybe that there are other cases that should be considered to be cases by this defendant, DeAngelo. And we're looking very carefully at any allegation to that effect to make sure that we go through any cases where that's alleged and go through the evidence, and rule out DeAngelo as a possibility there. So so far from what we've seen, we haven't seen anything that really amounts to that, but we are working on that. There's a question on the end over here.
I had a question.
There's somebody here first.
Hi, Megan Diskin, Ventura County Star. So what is the timeline here? I know you said the investigation is still ongoing. When will this might actually go to trial? And two, have there been any discussions about seeking the death penalty?
The timeline for the trial is not. I mean, the fact that the investigation is ongoing means that that we still are looking at things. We still are open to consider any additional evidence that might be out there, anything that might come in, anything that people might allege. But I don't see that as affecting the timeline for the case as far as the preliminary hearing and trial, and so we're going to be moving forward on that. And I think maybe District Attorney Schubert might be able to give us some indication as to what her thoughts are on it. I think we all have our thoughts there. I mean, we're working together as a group, and we want to move this forward as quickly as we can. This case has already has a lot of age on it, so we're trying to move forward as fast as we can. But Anne Marie,
just in terms of the timeline, I mean, let's remember Mr. DeAngelo has a right to a fair trial, and he has a right to a competent defense counsel. So we recognize that this case will not be something that goes to trial really quickly, but we also expect and hope that we move this process through efficiently, because we do have witnesses and victims that are aging, and these crimes happened many, many years ago. So I cannot give you a definitive answer. I can simply tell you that we have a robust team of people that are working on this, and we're going to try to move this case as quickly as possible. And I'll let Mr. Totten address kind of the penalty question that you asked.
Yes, good morning, Megan. As most people are aware, this case is death penalty eligible. 10 of the 13 murders that are alleged carry special circumstances, which under California law qualifies this case as a death penalty eligible case. The district attorneys standing before you all have and use a very solemn process in the decision-making of whether or not to seek death in any individual case, and will do so in this case. That process includes carefully looking at Mr. DeAngelo's full background, both mitigating and aggravating circumstances. We routinely also solicit input from the defense and take that into consideration. And that decision-making process is a ways away. We have a lot of work to do before we will get to the point of being able to sit down and make a decision of whether to seek death. But as I say, it is a very serious, very solemn process that we don't take lightly.
and there was a question on this end of the room over here. Could you? All right. So, all right. So, wait a minute now. I thought you said you were satisfied, but now you have a. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is take the mic. Just take the mic and give us your name and news outlet.
Megan Cuniff with the Daily Journal. What will the process be? Can you get more into the process for deciding whether to pursue it as a capital case? Will there be meetings about that? Will there be a vote on that? How are you guys going to decide?
Want me to discuss it?
All right, I'm gonna have District Attorney Totten complete his answer.
So as I say, that process is quite a ways down the road of this case. It will include an extensive background that, frankly, my office is conducting as we speak the defendant in this case. It will include us understanding the full breadth and scope of all of the different charges and the conduct that was involved in each of those charges. Any aggravating circumstances, the California Penal Code provides a very detailed list of aggravating and mitigating circumstances that prosecutors and ultimately juries must consider for purposes of deciding whether to impose the death penalty. And we will go through that very, very rigorous process, and as a part of it, we will invite in the defense bar to the defendant's attorneys to give us their input on the issue. When all of that is done, our expectation is that 6 of us will sit down and have a thorough and spirited discussion of that and arrive at a consensus on what the appropriate penalty is. For us to predict what that's going to be now would be both inappropriate and premature. I hope that answers your question.
I'm Sam Stanton from the Sacramento Bee. I've got a question about the new charges. The 4 in Contra Costa, is there DNA for those 4? And the 9 in Sacramento, I assume there is no DNA. So how do you... So with respect to the Contra Costa counts, I'm going to ask Dinah to take the mic.
Yes, so far we've been able to file charges, as I mentioned, on 4 of our cases coming out of Contra Costa County. And for 2 of our cases, we have DNA hits. We're continuing to investigate other cases from our county.
And the 9 from Sacramento?
The 9 from Sacramento do not have DNA, but they have, as we call them, signature marks, of which we've always been talking about for the last 40 years, that we are confident that they are the same individual.
But he's been accused of roughly 50 sexual assaults.
Right.
Will there be charges filed in all of them, do you think? Are there more?
The reality is, Sam, is that the statute of limitations, I mean, we have evolved, thank God, as a world, that now we have kidnap for rape as a crime, but in 1976 and 77, kidnap for rape was not in existence. Kidnap for robbery was. And so our lawyers have looked at this very strenuously to identify those cases where we could comply with the statute of limitations. Now, that being said, obviously we know, and we have always said that these are sexually motivated crimes as well, that they are rapes. The fact that we cannot charge some because of that statute of limitations does not mean that we will not seek to introduce that evidence at trial under what we call 1101B of the Evidence Code.
And have you contacted any of these victims to tell them that you were filing charges in the case?
I can't answer that question right now.
In Contra Costa County, we've been in contact with the victims of all of our cases for which we have contact.
In Santa Barbara County, I have been in touch with all of the victims, and I got a text this morning from Ms. Domingo. Her mother was one of the murder victims, and she said, "Good morning, Joyce. I continue to pray for you and the other DAs and your teams. Thank you for being in the fight on our behalf. Debbie."
Angela Nardone, The Voice, Lavos, California. Over here. On the same note, with regard to victims, can you talk about the outreach to victims and responses in whatever manner is appropriate?
All right, sure. Just from Orange County, from our point of view, we're in constant contact with the victims, basically the loved ones of the victims. And Anne Marie?
I think everyone would have the same answer. While I may not have answered the question perfectly for Sam, we have been in contact with victims that have been, whether they're charged or not charged. My experience with interacting with all of them, whether it was before or after the arrest, is tremendous gratitude. Some of it, I would say, even at the time of the arrest, was almost jaw-dropping because they felt that they didn't know if an answer would ever come. And the day that he was arraigned in April this year, there was a number of them that came to the court appearance. And I think it was very surreal for many folks. So I think for some folks it's still setting in. But as As Joyce mentioned, many of them probably felt that justice delayed was never going to be justice, and so we are here today to finalize that.
Hi, Zoreen from KTTV. Is it unprecedented to have 6 days coming together like this, jointly pressing charges? Is there history being made in this room right now?
The question is whether or not this is unprecedented. I think so. I can not recall anything similar happening in this state, nor can I recall any stories about it. I don't know any other way to let you know if it's. I don't think anybody here has ever heard of anything quite like this. So certainly, we've had cases where we have 2, maybe even 3 jurisdictions, trying a case jointly like this. But I believe this is unprecedented, in certainly in our state.
Sam from the Sacramento Bee again. Can you just explain why Sacramento? I mean, immediately after the arrest, Henry, you were saying maybe it would come south because the DNA evidence was here, was stronger. I mean, why is it coming to Sacramento?
Well, I think that, we had a lot of meetings, and, I think Mr. Totten this morning when we talked about it, from my perspective as Sacramento, and I know this, as I said many times, both personally and professionally, having grown up in Sacramento, this case changed our community. And it's very difficult to explain to folks what that means if you did not live through it. It's almost similar to saying I lived through an earthquake and trying to explain that. That's part of it from my perspective, in terms of the magnitude of this case for our community. But the other part of it is that, there are many victims, their family members that live in Northern California. And many of the ones from Southern California, Joyce has family members that live right in Sacramento. So we have to factor all those in. Mr. Rackauckas mentioned at the beginning, what are we looking at? I would also say that, Sacramento, we're a big jurisdiction. We have 175 lawyers. We have a crime lab. We have investigators. Our sheriff's department was a lead on this case for many, particularly when the arrest occurred. That's part of it. At the end of it all, it's what we all believe is in the best interest of this case, which is to try this in Sacramento as a team together with all of our resources dedicated. This is not simply a Sacramento case. This is a joint case of 6 jurisdictions.
Angela Nardone again from the Voice, Lavos, California. This is for District Attorney Totten. With regard to Ventura County, in the packet included 2 victims that will be included in so far. Are there potentially others in Ventura County that you could think fall related to this particular case? And outreach to victims, if you have anything to share about outreach to victims.
Well, I'll answer the second question first with regard to outreach. Both on the morning of following the arrest of Mr. DeAngelo, I spoke with both 2 of Lyman Smith's children that morning to advise them of the arrest. And this morning I spoke with the daughter of Lyman Smith, who's kind of the family representative, to advise her of this event and our plans to file the case in Sacramento. So we are staying in regular contact with them, and that process will be ongoing collectively with all of the victims and all of the respective offices. With regard to other cases, as you may recall, there was an individual, a recently exonerated individual by the name of Coley, where we did have the DNA tested in that case to see if it was connected to this defendant, and it was determined it was not. We also, I am aware that many of our frontline police agencies are very aware of this case and are reviewing old unsolved rapes. To date, we have not identified any cases that we suspect are involved this defendant.
Eileen Frere with KABC TV. Does the fact that the Orange County District Attorney's Office being under investigation by the Department of Justice for concerning the use of jailhouse informants, did that play a factor at all in deciding to have this prosecuted in Sacramento County?
No. We discussed this case as a group, and made a group decision based on what's in the best interest of the case. And I think that a number of the things have been set out already, but understand that that a large number of crimes occurred in Sacramento over some period of time, and there were other counties involved as well. But Sacramento really has the weight of the victims. I don't mean to be undermining or reducing or diminishing the importance of any victim anywhere. Certainly, the victims and the loved ones in Orange County are very, very important to us and to all of us. But as far as the testimony, the convenience to witnesses, the facilities, the convenience to investigators and everybody involved, Sacramento appears to be the right place for this trial. And also, this is a statewide case, and Sacramento is in fact the state capital. So I think it's very appropriate to handle a case in Sacramento. Thank you.
Hi, Joe Serna with the Los Angeles Times. I was hoping you could talk a little bit more just about the kidnapping charges to commit robbery, when you yourself, DA Sacramento, said that the motivation was sexual assault. Can you just walk through that logic?
Well, I think obviously we've charged kidnapping robbery. In those crimes, there were robberies, so there was motivations. Our theory will be that it's a motivation that was the intent to rob as well as sexually assault. Obviously, criminals can have multiple motives, so unfortunately the rape did not exist in terms of the statute of limitations.
My understanding is in some of those cases, the victim was barely moved, maybe to another room. The robbery might be a loss of like $75. Is that going to stick in a criminal court?
Well, I will say this. We don't file charges unless we believe we can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a long, not just the law itself that exists in the penal code. When we go back to look at the penal code from 77, 76, we follow the penal code. We also follow case law. So there's been an extraordinary amount of research put into this by both our office and other offices. And as I said, I'm confident that we don't file charges unless we believe we can prove them and we can meet the elements of those crimes.
And Ms. Schubert, Chris and Carlo, KFI News. I'm not a lawyer, much to my mother's chagrin. But one of the things I've been paying attention to is the pace that this case has been moving so far. I don't think DeAngelo has officially entered a plea yet.
Right.
Does this mean that we are going to see perhaps a pace picking up? And will we see elements of each of these DA's office embedded within your DA's office for this trial?
I definitely think you're going to see a lot of lawyers involved, perhaps to some people's chagrin, but definitely lawyers from all different counties. It depends on their offices whether they dedicate them, but I definitely know that if you look at the amended complaint today, if you have a copy in your press packet, you will see every elected district attorney's name on that, which is demonstrating our commitment. I fully anticipate that as the DA of Sacramento that I'll be swearing in some lawyers from Orange County, Ventura, other counties to help prosecute this case. So it will be a dedicated team effort. In terms of the pace, it's up to Mr. DeAngelo. It's his right to decide, or his lawyers, with consultation on when he's going to enter a plea. Obviously, from our perspective, now that we've come to this joint decision, that we've got witnesses that are, older, and so we want to move this case at a reasonable pace so that we can secure and get those prelims done, preliminary hearing, as I would say, because that's an important phase of this process.
Is that September 5th date still intact, or will that be?
I don't know if that's going to be changed. I would say it is still probably in the computer system, but you can assure yourself that it's on calendar for this Thursday at 1:30 in Sacramento in Department 61.
Sam Stanton with the V.
You just thought of a lot of questions on that drive down. I know you did.
It's a long drive.
Yeah, I know.
A little heads up, I could have flown. Just how is it going to work? When the Snelling case comes up, Mr. Ward, will you have a prosecutor in Sacramento full-time to present that with assistance from one of Sacramento's people, or just two of your own? How do you envision this happening between each?
It's a great question, and I have to say the reality of that will be we've invested a lot of work to get to this point where we are here today. I know from talking to not only Ms. Schubert but the colleagues that we all envision being a part of that process. The details of that, I'm sure collectively will work out on a hearing-by-hearing basis, but I have committed every member of our office and our Bureau of Investigations to assist Ms. Schubert's office in any way we can. I do plan on our office being actively engaged in that. What that looks like on a day-to-day basis and the details, I'm sure that's something that we'll probably just have to work out.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that concludes our time that we have allotted for this, and I want to thank all of you for your time, your attention, and your very insightful questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.